All right, let's examine this crisis with Luke Lamprecht from Women and Men Against Child Abuse. Luke, good morning. Thanks for talking to us. The case of Jocelyn Smith has captured national attention, but she, as we've said in that intro and in that package, she's just one of nearly 3,000 children who've gone missing over the past 5 years. What do these figures say about the state of child protection in South Africa?
The first thing we need to look at is what these statistics actually mean. So firstly, the police are reporting, say, for example, in 2013, your report mentioned someone going missing every 5 hours. I mean, that's hundreds of thousands of people. And then they're talking about a recovery rate in the last 5 years of about 3,000 children. So those are the amount that are found as opposed to the amount that are reported as missing. And then there's a whole lot that are not reported as missing. So, for example, in the work I do in the inner city of Joburg, we can find up to 20 abandoned fetuses, babies, infants within the city a month who are deceased and are never reported missing because the parents who are abandoning them for death don't report them as missing, so they don't reflect as statistics at all. Then you've got another category on the other extreme of that, where I had a case this year where a child was reported missing because she was abducted from Comic-Con via a social media program called Discord, where they set up to abduct her from Comic-Con, and she was reported as missing. Then we've got teenagers who have run away, and then you have got parents who have, in high conflict custody access cases, have abducted their children and haven't returned them to the other parent, and they've then been reported as missing. So there are a multitude of ways children go missing, but very simply speaking is the whole thing just talks about how vulnerable our children are to being abducted or kidnapped or murdered in their own communities and also by their own parents.
Oh, Luke, as you share that breakdown and just, the various ways, as you say, children are just so vulnerable in our country, it really is heartbreaking. You have labelled this crisis a scar on the conscience of South Africa. Why do you believe cases like Jocelyn's happen so frequently, and what systemic failures are allowing this to happen and persist?
So I think we must distinguish, for example, say a Jocelyn and that kind of scar from, say, one of your other, say, the first family in your insert, who had nothing to do with the disappearance of the child, and somebody took that 4-year-old off the Cape Flats. Whereas in the Jocelyn case, you've got a parent who uses their child as a commodity, says that their child has made them famous, kind of revels in it. Those are two totally different kinds of families. So I'm talking about the Jocelyn type of family, not your first family. I just want to be clear on that. And the Jocelyn family, for me, and much like the babies we find in the city of Joburg, the phrase I've coined is these are children whose births are not celebrated and their deaths are not mourned. Oh. So if you think about what that means, on the conscience of a country, is you have children who are used as commodities, children who have no value, they are simply discarded, they're not even afforded the right to. In fact, it links to one of your earlier stories about the undignified burial of those 42 people who are now being exhumed. We have children buried in pauper burials on a daily basis in our city because no one has claimed them and no one has reported them missing. So how do we live in a society where there is so little value given to children? That's the scar on our conscience.
Look, I mean, honestly, again, it must take a huge and lion heart on your part and those who work with you, people who work in this field across the country, to be able to do this work, because just hearing what you're saying already, it just, you can't listen to that and be unmoved. Your organization often highlights the link between vulnerability, poverty, and child exploitation. Just take us into that story a little more deeply around the socioeconomic conditions that are fueling the rise in trafficking and abductions.
So I think let's start at the unplanned, unwanted pregnancies. So what we know is poverty limits opportunity and access to resource. So if we look at the start of a terrible life for a child, which we call the war cycle or the world of abnormal rearing, it starts with an unplanned, unwanted pregnancy. So these are children who no one conceived in their mind before they conceived them in their bodies. So when those children arrive in the world, those children have no inherent attachment or meaning to the parent. And as a result, they can be used in these ways, for example, trafficked, sexually exploited. I had a case in previous years where a mother sold her child in those old days of the rape myth of HIV, sold her child to somebody to be raped because they thought it would cure them of HIV. So these children these parents don't see the children in these socioeconomic circumstances as gifts. They see them as burdens, and as a result, as potential commodities to be trafficked, sold, etc. So poverty definitely limits the opportunity to make good sexual health choices, and in addition to that, once the children are born, to access the correct services for those children in order for them to have healthy lives, as opposed to be used as commodities.
I think this is so educational, what you're saying, just about the nuances, first the categories and the circumstances around which children go missing. And it's important to note. Now, according to the SAPS, a child goes missing every 5 hours, Luke. Nearly a quarter are never found. For those who want to know, who do care about these kids, what needs to change in our immediate response mechanisms, like an Amber Alert system and police protocols?
All right. So if you look at for example, the Jocelyn case, I still in my mind can't understand how allegedly, we'll see what the sentencing proceedings reveal, but I can't understand how allegedly a white polo arrives in a community with a alleged traditional healer set up for a particular time, and nobody can provide us with an identikit, nobody can provide us with any kind of eyewitness evidence of who this person is, what they look like, how do we trace them, who the potential client was on the other side. So for me, the communities bear a responsibility to keep an eye on a child. So another example of how communities can help would be, you have a mother who has a child who is pregnant and arrives home without a child. Where's the child gone? So there needs to be alerts at various levels, from pregnancy where parents arrive home without children. Where's that child gone? There was a child who was in the community and now suddenly isn't in the community. Where's the child gone? Because in the case where you have caring families, like your first insert, those families will tell us, and they'll tell the police, and we will go and we will look for them. In the cases I'm seeing on the streets, no mother is going to tell me that they have dumped their baby in a dustbin in Hillbrow.
Again, so we've got that circumstance where children are missing. They're either groomed or they are predators on the prowl who snatch them. Yes. We do have cases where it's the caregivers, those who are meant to protect the children, who become the perpetrators. Again, to that concept of awareness, how can communities and schools be better empowered to detect and report early signs of neglect or danger at home?
I just want to say, in the cases we deal with, it's mostly the caregivers. So I just want to make that clear. Your initial case of the 4-year-old is actually an exception rather than the rule, because most people look after their small children. So the first signs of deliberate neglect and abuse would be that you would be able to create a language within schools for children to have the conversation. Because remember, we talk to children about saying no to being abused or telling us when they are abused, but then we don't respond appropriately. Or when they try to say no to adults just completely overrule them. So we need to create a language within communities and within schools where children are given agency to come forward and say, I'm battling, please help me. And that there are mechanisms in place to actually deal with that, because in the last 8 child murder cases I've given evidence in court, someone alerted someone to the fact that these children were being abused. In 2 cases, one, the police and social development were alerted. In one case, the social workers were alerted and placed the child back, and the child was murdered. So we need to have a system that, once we report to it, is responsive. And currently we live in a country of limitless need and limited resources.